Okay, this is what I was too impatient on the last video to I didn't queue up for you, but so we got the cross hurricane, the hurricane that's across the country from where it normally should be. And that's what this story is, tracking Hurricane Hillary, which is HH, which is the eighth letter of the alphabet, which we just had the wildfires in Hawaii on 8/8. So you got basically two 8/8s back to back.
Alex Wallace of the Weather Channel. Fast-moving wildfires are raging across the West this weekend. One person is dead near Spokane, Washington, which is under an emergency declaration. Hundreds of structures have been destroyed. And in Canada, all of British Columbia is under a state of emergency. Hundreds of fires are burning across the province, and around 30,000 people are ordered to flee. This includes Yellowknife, the capital of Canada's Northwest Territories, where most of the town has been evacuated as the flames close in. The governor of Hawaii is asking tourists to avoid travel to the parts of Maui that were devastated by wildfires. It comes as the death toll rises to 114. Governor Josh Green says about 1,300 people are still missing in Lahaina, with nearly 80% of the historic town surged. CBS's Lilia Luciano is in Lahaina with the latest. Lilia?
Good evening, Adriana. There are about 1,000 federal workers on Maui now, with some 350 of them specifically focusing on search and recovery. And according to FEMA, some 2,000 households or more have been approved for that federal assistance.
There's rising anger among Lahaina residents over the missing warnings of the approaching firestorm.
See, this is what that Hopi prophecy in the last video I made, I started it off with, there'll be cities there in the morning and they're just steam at the end of the day. That's what happened here.
If we gave them just a little bit more time, maybe people could have run from the areas that they were burned.
While Governor Josh Green supported the decision by officials to not sound the warning sirens, he promised a review.
We will get to the bottom of exactly how the fire started, how our emergency procedures and protocols need to be strengthened, and how we can improve our defenses.
Everything I owned, yes, was destroyed in the fire.
Lahaina survivors who lost their homes, like Kat Dukes, wonder where they'll end up long term.
What has been the most frustrating part of this process?
For me personally, it's the housing. I don't like to walk around aimlessly.
For me, it's nobody listens and nobody cares about the truth. That's what's been the most frustrating for me. Thanks for asking.
Knowing where I'm gonna sleep.
FEMA has now moved many families from shelters to hotels.
And they are asking, how long are we going to stay here? 9 months, they told us.
With 20% of the burned area yet to be surveyed for remains, locals worry about the speed of recovery.
The governor should not rush to rebuild the community without first giving people time to heal.
This is the number of people still unaccounted for remains close to 1,000, and even that estimate is unclear.
Frankly, we don't know. People have thrown numbers around, people have thrown cellular data stuff around.
And officials say they're keeping that number of people unaccounted for on purpose high so that they don't set themselves up for thinking that the job is done too soon. Adriana?
Lilia Luciano, thank you. To Ukraine now, where a new Russian missile strike killed at least 7 civilians and injured more than 100 others. It happened in the city of Chernihiv. CBS's Deborah Pata was close when the missile struck. She reports from Kyiv tonight.
The moment a Russian ballistic missile struck deep in the heart of Chernihiv. The weekend peace shattered in an instant, and the exact moment our CBS News team was driving towards the city center.
This is the very building we were heading for just minutes before we arrived. It was hit by a massive explosion.
In the line of fire, the city's landmark theatre, a university block, and the central square, where families take their children to play, and on this particular day was filled with people on their way to church to mark an Orthodox religious festival.
On the landmark to go Marc
A day of celebration turned into one of horror and loss, and a terrifying end to the summer holidays for passengers returning home from their vacation on this bus. I saw sparks, fire, and we started to fall. The glass shattered, Lydia said. Everyone was screaming. On a nearby sidewalk, emergency workers treated the wounded, but for this young woman, it was too late. Among the dead, a 6-year-old child and over a dozen more children injured. First responders rushing to the scene were shocked.
We try to save lives. It's bad because many people die very much bleeding.
Red Cross worker Andriy Yashchenko told us it took everyone by surprise, as this city has been spared the worst of the war for much of this year. But today, the crunch of glass and the mangled debris strewn across the main square was a brutal reminder that nowhere is safe in Ukraine.
The United Nations says it is extremely disturbed by this attack, describing it as heinous. And Adriana, tonight the city has called for 3 days of mourning.
Deborah Patta, thank you. Now to the campaign trail. Just days until the first Republican presidential